Well, Krish, it's been absolute chaos down here. Miles upon miles of gridlock traffic with people trying to get on one of those ferries at Dover Port behind me. Some of those caught up in the chaos. A young family with children in the car stuck in there for 7 hours. We spoke with an elderly resident here who was struggling to get to the train station. She told us she'd usually get a bus or even a taxi, but because of the gridlock, she was forced to walk. We also spoke with some workers who had to abandon their car miles from their workplace and carry their equipment into work. The French, as you say, are blaming a technical issue. Authorities here are blaming the French, saying they didn't have enough border staff on. But either way, this is one of the first days of the summer holiday, one that is long planned for, and it's clear that something went very wrong in their plans today. They piled into their cars with suitcases and optimism in the early hours of this morning. But by lunchtime, they were still here. Holidaymakers, lorry drivers and Europeans heading home queue for miles in slow creeping traffic towards the port of Dover. By 8 a.m, port authorities declared a critical incident. The warnings to arrive 4 hours early for booked ferries proved fanciful.
About 7 hours now. Yeah.
And how far up are you, do you think?
Well, SatNav says another half an hour to get 2 miles. This is our first big trip since we've been allowed out again, yeah. It's not the ideal first day.
That means almost 6 hours into Dover. My daughter is getting married tomorrow, so I need to be back in Belgium tomorrow morning.
That sounds very stressful.
Well, I just hope that everything will come okay, so...
We were planning to drive, but because we thought the planes, there's so many cancellations, my mother can hardly walk, so I thought this would be better. We're driving all the way to Croatia, but we can't even get to Calais. This is New Britain. It's Brexit, isn't it? This is Brexit. No, I don't care what they say, this is Brexit.
The holiday rush as schools break up always brings more travellers to this area. And in the first summer without travel restrictions since 2019, the port is expected to be busier than ever. But Dover authorities blame the chaos on the French, describing the staffing of their border checks as woefully inadequate. Do you think it's a sort of easy get out to blame the French authorities? Obviously, you know, the port isn't a new thing, summer holidays aren't a new thing, this happens every year. When is the town and the authorities going to get a grip of this issue?
Well, we feel we have got a grip of the issue because we have seen this coming, unfortunately. I wrote a letter to as many people as I possibly could 3 weeks ago saying that this day is going to be exceptionally busy, but it really was the French authorities did not have enough staff on. They had a mere minimum of people there and it just didn't help. We could not get the ferries across.
And how much of this has got to do with that B word, Brexit?
Yeah, that has partially got something to do with it, but we have been out of Brexit for a while now, so they needed to make sure that everything was ready so this day would not happen in the chaos that we have unfortunately found ourselves in yet again.
But for all the holidays disrupted, those that live in this port town feel the burden of gridlock roads most acutely. Sandra has run this cafe for 13 years.
This happened last week, it happened this week, it happened over Christmas, and it happened every year a few times, and we don't get any help, and they need to stop.
When you say it affects your business?
It affects a lot. Next door is empty. If you check all the shops, it's completely empty because the news say the roads is blocked, no one coming to the town, no one stop here, and we need to pay staff.
In the wake of 2 years of travel disruption caused by the pandemic, the pressure is on authorities on both sides of the channel to stop another summer of delays and disappointment. Well, this evening the government said this awful situation was entirely avoidable and unacceptable and that they would continue to work with the French authorities to find a solution. The traffic has calmed down here now in Dover. The traffic is moving more freely. And when I asked the council leader earlier whether today would be a one-off, he said he hopes so. Others were less optimistic. They cautioned that next weekend could be even worse, that it was expected to be the busiest travel weekend of the summer. The first real test, perhaps, of whether the French authorities and English authorities can work together better more effectively.
Anya Pop. Well, I've been speaking to Doug Bannister, Chief Executive of the Port of Dover, and I asked him about this claim that it was months of preparations spoiled by French border officials not turning up at the last minute, and why this had happened.
The provision of the border authorities in the Port of Dover is outside of our control. That's down for both the British government and the French government to provide the right resources. What we have done is we've been providing a traffic breakdown virtually hour by hour and then the associated resourcing requirements that we need. So we laid out what our requirements are to ensure the best possible flow of traffic as we could do. And we've been sharing that information for weeks. And then as far as we knew, that we were going to be getting an appropriate amount of resources to make certain that we could handle the volume of traffic during the morning this morning.
Who do you share it with? I mean, do you share it with both the Brits and the French? Or is it up to the Brits to pass it on to the French?
Well, we share it with everybody who's involved in the Dover system. So that is, and the ferry operators and the Kent Resilience Forum and central government, as well as Police Aux Frontières, the French immigration officers. And I should say we've been working very, very, very well with them in the planning for this very busy period. And it's just so disappointing through all the work that we have done in preparation for this, for the additional infrastructure that we have installed in the port to make it happen, that we reached the challenge that we had this morning.
I have to say, we've been speaking to a few locals today who say this is not a sort of a freak one-off event, that this has been happening, every year for a few years now.
Well, there's no doubt that on busy summer getaway weekends that we do get very, very busy, and that calls for good traffic management and all that sort of stuff. Now, and we also knew that after the UK left the European Union, the additional transaction times at the borders were going to make it slower to process. That's why we've created more additional infrastructure for this year, because we knew that the tourist business was going to pick up quite dramatically. And so we put all the planning that we could have put in. Now, having said that, too, we're on a busy day over this weekend. We're expecting over 10,000 cars. In a pre-pandemic busy day, it would have been around 15,000.
Right. So it is clear that post-Brexit checks have made things worse.
Well, they have, but that's not a surprise, because we've been working with this since we left the European Union. So we knew what the additional transaction times would be. And so that's why we've been working with very, very well with local partners, the Kent Resilience Forum, ferry operators, DFT, central government, to make certain that we had everything all identified for what we required for the summer season. So
if you're on a 9 o'clock sailing tomorrow, when should you arrive?
Well, my best recommendation to travelers is check with your ferry operators, to have a look at the Port of Dover travel and weather Twitter feed, because we're trying our best to keep people up to date.
Do you know that the French are going to be there tomorrow, or have you just got to cross your fingers and hope?
Well, I'm afraid, because we don't have any control over their manning levels, all we can do is we can plead, we can request, we can work with our government officials to help them to make certain that we have the resources on hand. My deep hope is that we won't see a repeat of this morning tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, there has been some good news for people trying to go on holiday. 700 British Airways staff have called off their strike at Heathrow after being offered an 8% pay rise. But for those holidaying in the UK, the RAC has warned of the busiest summer getaway on the roads in years. The hospitality sector is trying to make the most of its first undisrupted season since before the arrival of COVID. But as our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davis has been finding out, while there are plenty of bookings, there is a shortage of staff to deal with them.
For some of those hoping for the brief window of an open road this morning, plans were scuppered in the wake of another go-slow protest over fuel prices. On the M5 in Somerset, a small group of motorcyclists in cars controlled the pace at 30 miles an hour. Behind them, 3 police cars, and then the rest. The RAC predicted a record summer getaway on the roads. 18.8 million escapes by car, as it put it. But here, as elsewhere, liberation came in slow motion. From Heathrow, there was better news for travellers. A British Airways staff strike action was called off. But in Weston-super-Mare, we found plenty wary of cancellations and delays, still shunning foreign travel.
Are you going away on holiday at all?
Not abroad, no. I do normally go abroad, but not this year, no.
Why not?
As I said, too much disruption. I saw the news this morning, all the traffic jams going into Dover, sitting in the queue for 4 hours. Could do without that, really.
Were you tempted to go abroad?
No, not this year. I think we'll give it another year before we consider it.
But some were.
Are you going away for a holiday this year?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Portugal.
I think it really will happen that the overseas market is going to take a heavy knock.
And how's it looking here this summer?
This summer's looking very buoyant. We are hearing from many hotels, for an example, one quite close to us here, that have no rooms available until 2023.
Open without restrictions for a full season for the first time since 2019. It is a big year for the UK tourism industry, but it's not without ongoing challenges, particularly over rising costs and difficulties recruiting staff.
I think food is probably the main one. Everything's going up, the VAT's obviously gone back up.
Staff wages?
Staff wages are through the roof because there's a lot of bidding wars going on. On Wednesday we had a night porter job going, so we had 6 interviews booked in and only 1 turned up.
How are you feeling about the start of the summer holidays?
Yeah, good. In terms of looking forward to what we've got booked in already, we've got quite a good accommodation-wise, we're quite booked up.
And then, as if on cue, comes the rain. Heatwave over, brollies out on the beach, thankfully momentarily. As for many this evening, that long-anticipated summer holiday finally begins.